My primary discipline is dance, which I started formally at the age of 13. But I was in musical theater way before that, and I realized in musical theater what I loved was the dancing, and so I asked my parents, can I take some dance classes? And then a year after that, I was auditioning for everything and joining dance companies, and yeah, that started my journey. My name is Victoria Lynn Awkward, and I use she, her pronouns. In the Space Between is a journey where the performers get to slice open a world where they experience love, joy, pleasure, care. And we get into that world through dance, through breath, sighs, through textile fabrics. And I think of it as like that there's always this humming that exists around us. And through intention, we can increase that frequency, that vibrancy, and it can get louder. And so the process of the show is us getting that humming louder, getting that vibrancy louder, and really opening a portal into this world. And it's very heavily inspired by the uses of the erotic as we're experiencing our erotic selves, not in a sensual sense, but in a way of really feeling deep awareness of joy, pleasure, care. I originally thought like the space between is as a marginalized identity or voice, the reality that I live in, which may be harsh, and then a dream world, and then the space between is between those worlds. And through this process, I realized that that's not quite true, that the space between is the margin. It is the place where we thrive, and it's a place that's always available to us. It's that humming that can always increase for us. And so I like to think of the show as like we're in this space between, and we're always able to access that. As a queer Black femme, I am very interested in being around artists that have similar identities, and if they don't, then they're really strong allies. I'm really thankful that in this show, I'm working with a very diverse cast of artists. And so when we're talking about joy, and we're talking about pleasure, and we're talking about love and care, it's coming from a shared place of challenge and hardship and oppression. And so these words that sound very maybe like magical have a real sense of depth to them and heft to them, because we understand that care, that joy are liberation practices, and that they're not some frilly idea, but actually essential to creating an ethical society, creating a careful society, creating a society that can sustain. And so I think there's a level of like urgency and reality that we play with. We play with both creating imaginative worlds, but also being like, okay, we need to say this because we need to move this emotion through our body. We need to shift the energy of the audience that will come to see this. And that sense of play but also purpose is really important to me as an artist. I feel it's less about holding the intersections of my identity and actually letting them be free. I feel in my art, my femness can run wild, and that can mean anything. It can mean me holding more masc energy. It can be being more non-binary. I feel that my Blackness can mean a history of strength. It can mean a history of softness. I feel in my art, I get to explore all these new imaginations of what my identity can represent. And then when I have that felt knowledge after performing, I bring it into the world and I move differently with how I see myself. Creating from an intersectional lens allows us to play into everything that we are and everything we want to be and things that we didn't know we were. one of the dancers in this piece, Justin Daniels, said after our residency, he said, it's really nice to be in a group where you feel both admired by and inspired by the people you're with. And I feel when we're watching each other in rehearsals, we're seeing different parts of ourselves, and we're like, I want to try that. I like the way that she flips her hair. I like the way that she runs her hands through her hair. I like the way that she holds her feminist. I like the way that she holds her blackness. And we get to be inspired by each other and also admire what we all bring to the table. Yeah, I think that one of the aesthetics within the TTO aesthetics that I really see within this work is the sensation of unrealities, which to me I translate as the fact that often queer people, we have to make our own imaginative worlds for us to have success, family, community. And I think in the space between it's talking to that exact idea that we have access to this unreality, we have access to this imaginative world right now. We deserve love, care, hope, connection, and just remembering that there's always an access to that. I think about queerness in a very similar way that TTO thinks about it, where it's not only a part of my identity, but also a theory on liberation. I'm very inspired by Black queer artists that came before me, again, nodding to Audre Lorde, who really consider, if I want to be free from myself, what does that mean and how do I do that? And then I think that spans out to, if I want to be free, how do I get my community free? And for me, that also expands to, how do I be free in relationship to the natural world, in relationship to this earth that we're living on? Advocating for myself an artist is something that comes naturally to me, but I've had to adjust how I do it as I grow and age so that it feels more sustainable. When I was younger, I was really fiery and I was just like, well, that's not right, and I just wanted to fight everything, which would really exhaust me. And so now I'm more so in the mindset of I want to find people that are in alignment and find community where it's we may be working through problems, but we're working through them with a shared level of respect and care. And so anything that came up with the Theater Offensive, it felt like we're partners in this work. And it just felt like a representation of kind of what I think the world should be. Well, I think that at this point in my career, I'm kind of coming back to myself as I was as a kid, which as a kid, I loved musical theater, I loved drawing and crafts. And so those are things that I'm starting to sprinkle back into my dance practice. So in this work for this residency, the dancers do sing, they do kind of exaggerated breath. And then there's also this really stunning visual of this really large fabric set piece. There's something as a kid where I was already multidisciplinary, and I'm starting to bring that back. A lot of the people I've surrounded myself, the authors that I'm reading, like Audre Lorde, just informed me to think about, again, that idea of pleasure and joy, and what does that mean as a leader? And it just has made me feel the most soft that I've ever been in my life, while still having boundaries, while still standing up for what I believe in. And so that emotional journey happened on this 22 months period, and I can really see it in the work that we created, where we are challenging ourselves. It's rigorous, it's exhausting, but there's so much care between the artists that are creating the work, and I feel that that's really palpable. I mean, in this residency, I've had opportunity to really have care in a tangible way. I hired a director, a music director, a composer, a costume designer, a lighting designer, a scenic designer, a rehearsal director. So there's all these leaders in the room. So when I'm leading the space, I feel not alone, and I can release my leading and let someone else lead. And then I've also hired these dancers who are just such incredible creatives, and they're so embodied in their own practice that they're also leaders. So even if I'm asking them to do something, it's completely a conversation. And that feels like care to me, because so much of my experience as a Black woman is like being the strong person that can help to change the world, and that's just kind of a toxic position to put myself in. And so to feel care by being in a room full of collaborators, of people working together, is life-changing. And I wish that for every person. Right before the beginning of this residency, I went through a lot of grief, and that kind of grief, when you go through it, it makes you really look at your life, and you can't force yourself to just brush it off and keep going. And so I had to really ask, what do I need in order to live a life that would make me proud, that would make my friends who passed away proud, and that would create a world where like younger versions of me and older versions of me could also feel that sensation of just being and not having to strive to be. This is really a work that is in beautiful conversation with the other two cohort members of this residency. I see us all as conduits, advocates, scholars, and artists who are really investigated in providing a care, love, pleasure ethic for this world, and really invested in building language and tools and actionability around what that looks like. And so I say it's a remembered way of being, because I do believe that many indigenous cultures did live in this, like in parts of these ideas, and that they were weeded out to create structures of oppression so that power and finance and resource could be held by very few people. Yeah, I hope that people feel more, well, first when they arrive and see the show, I hope that they feel transported into the portal that we're creating, and that for the hour that we're performing, that they are in this realm that may feel new or familiar to them. And then after that, I really hope that people have a sense of just a little bit more heightened awareness in their bodies. Maybe they feel a little bit more happy or excited to talk to the people they came with, and maybe they take just a little bit more pause as they exit the space to look at any installations that are in the space or the trees that may be lining the streets as they exit. And I hope that that sensation of pause and awe and wonder is a spark that they can tap into and widen beyond this moment of our show. I think that the show is really just clarifying my aesthetic, that I am really interested in visuals, in really beautiful music that feels that you can like feel in your body, and rigorous and emotionally informed dancing. And so I'm excited to see that develop further in my work, and just for that aesthetic to get clearer. And I'm just thinking about the other 3 projects that I'm working on, and I can see how they're all feeding into each other, and that this multidisciplinary aesthetic will really just get more and more potent and more powerful.